And we are live. It's the Revved Up 906 podcast, a Detroit Pistons podcast to be exact. And I'm Hudson.
And I'm Ryan.
And y'all know the deal. I got to talk to you guys about a few quick things before we get into episode number 31 of season 3. First off, if you are new to the channel, thank you for watching, but also make sure to like and subscribe. And if you happen to like our podcast and want more of it, you can follow us on Instagram. That link is in the description below. We post clips, debate topics, hot takes. We try to do it weekly, so make sure to go follow us on Instagram. And if you want to stay in on the know with everything going on with the Detroit Pistons. And if you're trying to take in more Pistons content, we tend to share other Pistons creators on our Instagram. So there's a lot of great options out there right now. And so a lot of fun content to take in. Let's get into episode number 31 of season 3. And we got a good one for you guys today because we are talking about a plethora of different topics surrounding the Detroit Pistons. A lot of exciting things happening. We're going to highlight JB Bickerstaff being named NBA All-Star head coach of Team USA. Pistons in need of a second option following their loss to the Houston Rockets. There's an updated NBA power rankings that I think you Pistons fans are going to be pretty excited about. And then, of course, we're going to be doing our weekly topic of player shoutouts of the week. Ryan, I'm excited to get into our first topic, JB Bickerstaff being named NBA All-Star head coach. First Pistons coach to do it since Flip Saunders in 2006. I know we're both a big fan of Flip. May he rest in peace. And as far as national recognition and people talking about JB Bickerstaff and the success he's having with the Detroit Pistons, we had a great quote come out this week from Chandler Parsons. Quote, "It's one of the best coaching jobs I've ever seen," end quote. So big props from former NBA player Chandler Parsons. And then we also had Pistons owner Tom Gores get on the X, the Everything app, and give a congratulations to JB. Quote, "Congratulations to JB and his coaching staff. A well-deserved honor and proud moment for Detroit. This recognition is a testament to JB's leadership and culture this franchise has established," end quote. That's something that we don't always see, Ryan, and we pay attention to what Tom Gores is saying, his press conferences when he does get behind the mic. It's really cool to see JB kind of getting the love that we've thought he should have got all last season.
Oh yeah, definitely. When you think of just the huge mistake that Cleveland made by letting him go because
Yeah,
he wasn't good enough, and then he ends
right.
up in our lap. And at first we're going, I don't know if he's gonna be the coach that we're looking for. I don't know
Hmm.
what to expect because yes, with Cleveland, he turned them around and built them into where they are now. But outside of Cleveland, he really hasn't had past or prior coaching experience as a head coach in the NBA.
Yeah.
Obviously, had his little bit of a stint as the head coach for Memphis, those 2 seasons. But outside of that, he
Mhm.
really hasn't really been established as a like high end head coach. But man, fans were mistaken quickly. Last year was a honestly a great way to start your career as the Detroit Pistons head coach. And the fact that you
Yeah.
go 44 and 38, make the playoffs, and do this in your first season in which the Pistons were in a drought for a long time.
Hmm.
And the fact that he came in, basically cleaned house with Trajan Langdon and set in stone like this is the foundation, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to build from the get-go. And the fact that he had such a quick turnaround and buy-in from
Yeah.
all of the guys. It didn't matter if you were player one on the roster, aka Cade Cunningham, or if you were the guy coming off the bench. It didn't matter who the player was or who the individual was. Every single player was bought in from the very beginning, and it proved evident through the entirety of last year, all the way to now, where we're number one in the East. Like it shows you how good and uber talented and just how good of a coach JB Bickerstaff is and what how good he is for this young Pistons team. Because you go from 44 and 38 to right now 33 and 11. Like, talk about a hot start and talk about building off of
Yeah.
what you built up last year. He has been nothing but great for us. And honestly, like last year, not last year, the year prior with Monty Williams, we sat there going like, this guy clearly is checked out. He doesn't want to be here. We don't know what to expect night in, night out. And obviously, he didn't like Jaden Ivey for some odd reason. And so Jaden Ivey would never see the floor. And you look at that, and we'd always question that. Or prior to Monty, Dwayne Casey was awesome, but he needed to come in to reset that culture to really establish
Yeah.
to where we are now because Stan Van Gundy did such a terrible job. So we've had a slew of honestly unfortunate head coaches, but we've had little sprinkles of greatness between Dwayne Casey and then now JB Bickerstaff. So as far as a standard setter, JB Bickerstaff has been excellent so far in his young tenured head coaching position with the Pistons. In just 2 years, he has been phenomenal. And it shows, and the NBA is on notice that the Pistons are coming, and that any team for the Eastern Conference is going through Detroit for the finals, for the Eastern Conference finals, that is this year.
Yeah. Well, and something small in the grand scheme of things, but means a lot to me, and at least that it comes off as an important thing, is you've seen on Pistons Instagram as of recent JB and Cade Cunningham walking off the team bus together and coming into the arena for game days. And that just shows me a lot that they have a close relationship and that they're aligned, which is a great thing to see from afar. And then also you try to put yourself in the shoes of the Cleveland Cavaliers and what they were kind of thinking when they let JB go after several playoff appearances. I'm assuming that it must have been just future plans not aligning as far as management with coaching. Maybe he just didn't like where they were going with things, going after veteran players rather than going through the draft. Because we've seen some of JB's teams do very well with younger guys. But they kind of look crazy for letting him go, and the Pistons organization has really utilized him as a whole, and it seems that his leadership in this new regime under JB Bickerstaff is a whole new Pistons organization with a fresh new look. And as a Pistons fan, that feels great. My only thing, and I'm just saying this because we haven't dealt with this, obviously, with me and you growing up watching Pistons basketball. I hope it doesn't cause any distractions as the Pistons head toward the end of the season, looking to solidify themselves as a top seed in the Eastern Conference. Um, I'm just saying that as like a little caveat, just so like we've never dealt with this before. Hopefully, it doesn't lead to distractions. I won't, don't think it will, but I just kind of have to put that out there because it's like, wow, might have two Pistons on the All-Star team for sure, one, and then JB Bickerstaff during All-Star break, get to see him. So that'll be must TV for sure. I want to talk about our second topic for today, Ryan, and I think this is something that people are going to have many different opinions on. Um, the Pistons in need of a second option if this is the case. Uh, the talks of this topic have ramped up since the Pistons' loss against the Houston Rockets. I was listening or reading rather a New York Times article written by Hunter Patterson. I just kind of want to read this quote for a little bit, just so we can kind of see where the national sports writers are looking because they look all over the NBA and have a bit of different perspective than just somebody in Michigan that's a Pistons fan. Hunter Patterson of New York Times says another facet of the Rockets' game plan was to deny Cunningham the ball after they forced it out of his hands. But Detroit was unable to capitalize on the advantages created when the Rockets sent two defenders at him. Quote, That's something we welcome, Cunningham said post game of the Houston coverages. It creates 4-on-3s out of that, and I trust my teammates. So we're seeing from the perspective of Cade that he's not really seeing it as an issue. Cunningham's trust is admirable, but this loss and the way it unfolded illustrated just how much the Pistons need another player they can count on for a steady 20 points anytime they step on the hardwood. The February 5th trade deadline is just under 2 weeks away. Friday's loss should undoubtedly be considered as Detroit's front office surveys the trade market with the deadline looming. Now, Ryan, as far as this topic of do the Pistons need to make a trade to get a second option around the perimeter for Kate Cunningham to kind of work off of, I'm not too worried about it, as in, I don't think we're going to make a crazy move because like Tobias showed us just last week, he can on any given night go off for 25 points. Same with Karis LeVert. He can give us 20 on any given night. Duncan Robinson make a couple extra threes in a big game, and then he's at that mark also. And then there's a couple other guys on the border there that can show up on any given night. Jaden Ivey is one that comes to mind, that can score in bunches. And it just seems to be evident that there may be a need for a second option in big time games against the Houston Rockets, against the New York Knicks, even though we were able to topple them a couple weeks back. But Ryan, is where's your head at as far as watching these games, the eye test, and if the Pistons do need a second option to Cade Cunningham's number one option?
So to me, it's interesting because you brought up an excellent point there as an example of the New York Knicks and the Houston Rockets side by side. And you look at their rosters, you honestly would go the Knicks or the Rockets. And that's no disrespect to what Houston has going for them. But if you look at the star talent, if we go off of the NBA standard of star talent, the Knicks have undoubtedly the most star talent because they have OG Anunoby. Even though I don't think he's a superstar, he's still a star, and that's Jalen Brunson. And then you throw Karl Anthony Towns in there. And then
Right.
technically, honestly, the way he plays, you could throw Josh Hart in there. And then you have Mikal Bridges. Like you have a loaded team. They may not have the deepest bench in the league, but they have a good starting five. Um, and then you look at the Rockets. Yes, you have Amon Thompson, who is awesome. And yes, you have Kevin Durant, who's a first ballot Hall of Famer. And
Yeah.
then Fred VanVleet can get his own. But Fred VanVleet's been also injured more recently this season than not. They have Steven Adams. Steven Adams just got injured recently.
Hmm.
Alperen Sengun is legit. He's one of the better bigs in the NBA as a whole, specifically the Western Conference. So you look at up and down the roster, they don't have a bad team at all. But if you look at those two teams side by side, to me, it's not like, okay, the question with the Knicks,
Hmm.
obviously we could handle them. So to me, when you look at the Knicks roster side by side, if you're going starting five caliber, I'm taking the Knicks over the Rockets just because of what they could do. And so to me, when you bring those two up as an example, and everybody's like, oh, the Pistons need a second star next to Cade Cunningham because they couldn't handle the Rockets. I'm sitting there going, I watched the game. I'm sitting there going, yes, that you could make the case for that. However, I see it as something else. I saw it as they just didn't show up. And that's really what it is. Because and comparatively, if you were to go off those two examples, who do the Pistons care about more? The New York Knicks, who they lost to in a controversial bad callings series last year in the playoffs? Or do you care
Right.
about the Houston Rockets, who, yes, they've had your number here, give or take the last couple of years, and they have the twin brother of one of your players? Like, I would care more about the Knicks just because you're going to have to face off against them potentially in the playoffs this season. Whereas the
Yeah. Right.
Rockets, let's say you do face off. The next time you face off is going to be in the championship. And I don't know if the Rockets have a good enough roster to even make it there. So to me, when I look at these two games, I see it as they just didn't show up to play, not as, oh, the Pistons aren't good enough. They need a second star. So I'm torn because you have Jalen Duren, and Duren has been phenomenal this season. And I think the sky's the limit still. He can still get better. And so to me, I, I think he is the second option. I don't think it's anyone else. And if we do make a move like we talked about last week with Jaren Jackson Jr., I love Jaren Jackson Jr. But what is he going to add to this team and what are we going to have to give up? I'm all
Mhm.
for adding a second option, but I think our second option is already on this team. Unless we're, and yes, we could use the trade exemption and take in a player without having to give up a player. But what team in the NBA is going to just take on a like two future second round picks as an example in exchange for one of their high end players? There's not a lot of bad teams out there right now that's going to do that. So to me, if you're going to accept one of those players, it has to be somebody that's going to fit this team well. And it has to be somebody that's on the higher end because all I see them adding, if they are to add anything, is another Karis LeVert, Duncan Robinson type player. And I just don't know how many more of those extra guys are going to help this team because I think the team is already pretty well built. So I'm torn as a whole. I think we do have the second option. I do think it's Jalen Duren. I don't think we need to look elsewhere for this big blockbuster trade that everybody in the NBA seems to have the Pistons wanting to make right now. I think we
Yeah.
are right where we're supposed to be. We're 33 and 11. We're first in the East. It's one game. I think we got to look at the next couple of weeks, head into the trade deadline and see how we play because I think we're fine. But if we start losing a couple games and sliding here and there going into the weekend, then maybe you make a move. But I really think our second option is Jalen Duren.
Well, and here's my thought on it. I don't want to get to the second round of the playoffs and we're kicking ourselves because the Pistons lose a couple guys to injuries or whatever might happen just naturally through a couple playoff series. And we're kicking ourselves because we don't have that scoring off the bench or that guy alongside Cade Cunningham. And we're like, well, we should have made that trade 2 months ago or whatever it might be. And just to play devil's advocate a bit, as good as Jalen Duren is, he can still disappear at quarters at a time. Mainly just because if boards aren't dropping his way or their offensive boards aren't landing in his hands, that it just naturally leads to less points for him just because he does depend so much on rebounding. Now, you mentioned, and it was a great point, we need just another guy like a Duncan Robinson-esque, a Karis LeVert. Unfortunately, I think that guy is Malik Beasley. I think we're missing him, and I think if he was contributing his 4 5 threes a game, we're not losing these games to the Oklahoma City Thunder, to the Houston Rockets. I think we're blowing these teams out and no one's going to be able to compete. But unfortunately, we just can't add him to our roster, or they're just not adding him to the roster. I just think that we notice the Pistons needing a little extra boost from the 3-point line in these big time games. Um, and like when we beat the New York Knicks, like I mentioned before a couple weeks ago, they kind of shot themselves in the foot with Karl Anthony Towns just not showing up. I don't even know if he suited up that game. He played so bad. Um, and unfortunately, if Cat turns it on that game and puts up 25, we might not be able to keep up with them. So there's just certain intricacies like that where it's like, okay, do we need a little bit more firepower? I think so in a way, but I think Trajan Langdon's going to be very conservative in making a decision. Um, do you think, Ryan, they should make a move before it's too late, before the trade deadline, or if you're the GM, are you taking this team the rest of the season?
So it's tough because I look at it as if I'm going to make a move, I can't shake up this roster because this roster is 33 and 11 right now. They are well over 500. They've
Right.
been first in the East for a long period of time now. And it doesn't seem to matter who we match up against, who comes to town. We're gonna at least be close or win that game.
Right,
Um,
right.
like Boston came into town as the second ranked team in the East, and we were able to handle them. Um,
Yep.
and the Knicks have done it multiple times throughout the season, and we've been able to handle them. And I understand your point of Karl Anthony Towns could go off for 25, and we don't know. And oftentimes he does shoot himself in the foot, honestly, multiple times, too many times to
Yeah.
count. But like, and I understand that, but I think with a lot of those games too, coaching comes down to it. And do I trust JB Bickerstaff to make the right decision at the end of the day? Yes, yes, I do. So
Agreed.
with
Agreed.
those kind of games and scenarios where yes, you could have Karl Anthony Towns going off for 25 points, or you have Jalen Brunson just show up and drop 40 on you. I think those are controllable. I think you game plan a certain way, and I think within the decision making inside the game, I think there are decisions that JB makes that are very smart and very like understandable, but sometimes they just don't work out. And I think if we can get the guys going for that point in time, we're fine. Um, as far as an addition goes, I think again it has to be somebody that doesn't shake up the roster. And so I guess to put it into perspective, a guy that we could be looking at is a guy very similar to Rasheed Wallace in just the overall impact. I think that's kind of what we're looking for right now because the Pistons before that trade were good. They were really good. But that trade to get Rasheed in at the deadline changed the whole outcome of that season to which they were
Right.
finally competing. And
Hmm.
so not to say that they couldn't have gone decently far without him, but he was that integral piece that was missing. And comparatively, yes, Malik Beasley could be that, but I don't think he is. If he was, he would already be on the roster. And Langdon would have recognized that instantly. I think, yes, you could add Beasley to this team, and the 5+ threes that he shot out last year would be phenomenal for this team right now. Because if you can add any 3-point shooters at any given time, man, that's a recipe for success right there. You look at the Golden State Warriors most recently when you have Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, etc. Andre Iguodala, when at times needed to shoot the three, he could shoot the three. They have Jimmy Butler now who can shoot the three, not at a high clip per se, but he can shoot the three. I think in today's day and age, it is very, very useful. But I think it has to be a Rasheed Wallace impact type player. So obviously, if you look at the two, Rasheed Wallace at the time, yes, he was decently good, really good, borderline all
Hmm.
star, but he wasn't really a hot commodity because he'd always be getting fined or thrown out of the games or any of that. And if we can maybe not get an Isaiah Stewart type current NBA player, but if we can get a guy that can come in and impact the team in the way that Rasheed did, I think that's the piece we're looking for. So not necessarily a big blockbuster deal like Jaren Jackson Jr. or Michael Porter Jr. or you name it. I think it has to be somebody that can impact the team, not take up a ton of salary, because that would be a no-no for us going forward. But one of those impactful guys, I think, is the key to this team. Because if you bring in a guy that you don't know the impact he could make, then I'd be very, very skeptical to make that move.
Make sure to comment below what your thoughts are on if Trajan Langdon is going to make a move towards the trade deadline. We'd love to know what you guys got to say. Ryan, some exciting breaking news regarding the Detroit Pistons as of today of the recording. The latest NBA power rankings dropped, and I think Pistons fans are going to be pretty excited about this. And the Pistons are at the number one spot after beating the Sacramento Kings pretty handedly. I'm going to go through the top 10 NBA power rankings just so I can kind of prove a point later on. The Pistons at the number one spot, of course, the Oklahoma City Thunder at number two, Houston Rockets at number three, San Antonio Spurs at four, the Denver Nuggets at five, Phoenix Suns at six, Minnesota Timberwolves at seven, Boston Celtics at eight, New York Knicks at 9, and the Cleveland Cavaliers at number 10. Ryan, what I find so fascinating about this list in the current state of the NBA is that there's only one, two, three, there's only four Eastern Conference teams in the top 10. The other six belong to the Western Conference, and the Pistons are at the top seed with the other three Eastern Conference teams at the bottom three. So the Western Conference is obviously at like a really good point right now, and just a lot of great teams in the West. Um, Ryan, what are some of your thoughts with the Pistons being at number one? It kind of feels vindicated, and they've earned that spot playing at a high level. And technically, the Thunder have less losses than the Pistons, but yet somebody somewhere thinks that the Pistons team have an upper notch on the Oklahoma City Thunder.
So to me, that shows me um, just the example that I mentioned earlier of how you've had the Knicks come into town, you've had the Celtics come into town, and
Hmm.
at that point in time, they were both the number two seed in the East, and we just knocked them off and controlled the game from the get-go. They went on a couple runs towards the end, but we finished it off. So with that example in mind, outside of, Cleveland, I really don't think they have a chance at the Eastern Conference Finals. I think at most they're going to make it to the second round, but after that they're going to lose out. Um, and that's probably too high for them, honestly, too. So I really think the Eastern Conference, the way it's shaping up to be, I think that Detroit is the team to go through. It is the city to go through. But I think it's one of those three teams for the Eastern Conference Finals of being the Pistons, Celtics, and Knicks. I think it's going to be those three for sure. To say who the two are, who knows? Because I think the Celtics, Pistons, and even though I love the Pistons, I think this all three of them are a toss-up as of now. But I do think all three have a shot at the Eastern Conference Finals. And then comparatively to the Western Conference is loaded. We all know that. The East is really nothing right now, especially without Tatum. If Tatum can come back on top of what Boston's doing, oh my goodness, it's going to be Pistons, Celtics,
Right.
Eastern Conference Finals. But that West, the way it's shaping up, it's really the Thunder's to lose, but who's to say what the Thunder even does? Because they could crumble, and honestly, we could crumble. So it's a big toss up, but I think just in the example of Boston and New York coming to town, both the number two seed in the East, and yet we were able to handle business even when it was looking bad on our end, we were able to handle our own. So I think from that regard, I think everybody's like, yeah, this Pistons team is legit. Whereas the Thunder, everybody's not surprised that they're at where they're at, but they know that they are by far the best team in the Western Conference and maybe the league. But I think it's a toss up between one and two for the Pistons and Thunder. I personally am going to go Pistons every time because I'm a Pistons fan, and I think the Thunder are beatable. But I think the Pistons are beatable too at times. So I like it. I love it a lot. I think they're right where they should be, at least top three at the very minimum.
Well, and I can't wait for the Pistons and Thunder to match up because last year we had a great game that went right down to the wire and just a couple missed calls that JB Bickerstaff was just absolutely livid after that game. I think it's going to lead to a fun rivalry very, very soon. And when talking about the Western Conference a little bit, because we always talk Eastern Conference, I obviously they are loaded right now as a conference as a whole. They just know how to win. Many veteran players when you look up and down the rosters, except the San Antonio Spurs. And I'm just not really afraid of any of them as a Pistons fan and watching them, kind of just back down teams. The Thunder are the only team that I'm a little bit worried about in a 7 game series of how the Pistons would fare. But as far as the Spurs, we'll take them on. The Rockets, we can take them on in a 7 game series. I know they got the best of us just last week, but I think in a 7 game series, we have the upper edge. And the Nuggets are a little scary just because of Nikola Jokic and the veteran team that they have and that chemistry they've built over many, many years. Um, And the Celtics, like you said, I think are going to be a team. They're in a way a team of destiny just because of how well they are playing without Jason Tatum. Jaylen Brown has kind of solidified himself as a very, very good NBA player, and he always plays well against the Detroit Pistons, always gives it his all. Um, so I think it's going to be interesting to see how the NBA power rankings go forward and as the weeks progress, if the Pistons will be at the top spot. And I think it shows that many people and commentators and writers take the Pistons very, very seriously just because the Thunder do have less losses than the Detroit Pistons, but yet they give the Pistons the nod at the number one seed. The fact that we are just in the same conversation as the Oklahoma City Thunder, is just absolutely remarkable. I'm so happy to be a Pistons fan right now. It is just like bathing in glory. So, so, so cool to even be in the same conversation as the OKC Thunder, with them just being champions last season. It is our point in the episode where we give our player shout outs of the last week. Last week we had Ron Holland mentioned, I believe Dennis Jenkins. Ryan, who are you shouting out this week?
I'm going to be giving a shout out to Duncan Robinson. He has
Oh,
been playing up to the level I expect him to be playing at.
yeah.
The way he was able to help the team bounce back against the Kings, and I understand the Kings suck right now, but it's a good bounce back win
Yeah.
following the Rockets, in which that's a game that you should have won too. But he played good against the Rockets, played good against the Kings. He's been playing great all season long. Maybe he's had a goose egg here and there, but for the most part, he is exactly what he thought he was going to be. I think there's
Hmm.
still room for him to even hit an even higher level. And I would be ecstatic for that. I think Miami Debo is still out there. Um, I think he could still be the Tyler Hero to the Cade Cunningham that we might be missing out on. Who knows? But shout out to Duncan Robinson. He has been lighting it up recently.
My player shout out of the week. We usually try to do underrated players, role players that are just having a great week. But I am going to do Cade Cunningham this week, coming off a wrist injury. Played very well against the Sacramento Kings. 29 points, 13 of 22 shooting, 3 of 5 from the 3-point line, 5 rebounds, 11 assists. Did have 5 turnovers, but for the most part was able to protect the ball. He does just have the ball in his hands all game long, so I can see how he could get 5 turnovers, but he's just playing really well. Gave some good quotes after the game. It seems that he's finally comfortable with that wrist, which is a good sign as we're nearing in on the All-Star break. We want to make sure he stays healthy for the second half of the season and hopefully no minor wrist injuries are becoming nuisance, So it's good to see that he is getting healthy, even though he is a vegan. Vegans tend to take a little bit of a recovery because they don't have they can't eat that steak and their wrist is fine. That will do it for today's episode number 31 of season 3. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.